Israel just bombed an election. Not a missile base, not a military bunker. An active, ongoing election. The votes were being counted. The ballot box was on the table. The men whose only job is to choose Iran's next supreme leader were sitting in that building. And Israeli jets turned it into rubble while the counting was still happening. That is not a metaphor. That is not speculation. That is confirmed by an Israeli defense official who spoke to Axios and said exactly this. We wanted to prevent them from picking a new supreme leader. 5 words that explain everything. Not collateral damage. Not a mistake. A deliberate, targeted decision to bomb the most politically important gathering in Iran's modern history, while it was actively in progress. And here is what makes this even more extraordinary. This was not the first time Israel hit this election. The night before the Qom strike on March 2nd, Israeli and U.S. jets destroyed the Assembly of Experts' main headquarters in Tehran. The clerics survived that one and moved their meeting south to Qom, to Iran's holiest city, 150 kilometers from Tehran, thinking the distance would protect them. Israel found them again. Found them while the votes were on the table. And hit them again. 2 buildings, 2 cities, 2 nights in a row. The election was bombed twice. To understand exactly how significant this is, you need to understand what the Assembly of Experts actually is, because most people watching this have been told it is Iran's parliament. That description is wrong. The Iranian parliament has limited power. It passes laws that can be overruled. The Assembly of Experts is something completely different. It is a council of 88 of the most senior religious scholars in the Islamic Republic, and they hold one single authority that no other person or institution in Iran can exercise. They choose the supreme leader. They supervise him. Under Iran's constitution, they can even remove him. And under Article 111, the moment a supreme leader dies, they are required to convene immediately and appoint a successor. No other process exists, no backup mechanism, no alternative pathway. If the Assembly of Experts cannot function, there is no legal way for Iran to appoint a new supreme leader. The entire constitutional machinery of the Islamic Republic grinds to a halt. On February 28, 2026, that became an emergency unlike anything the Islamic Republic has faced in its 47-year history. The United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, a massive coordinated air campaign on Iran's capital, Tehran. In the opening strikes, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was assassinated. His compound was destroyed. 49 of Iran's most senior officials were killed in that first wave alone. Khamenei had ruled Iran with absolute authority since 1989. He was only the second supreme leader in the entire history of the Islamic Republic. The first was Ayatollah Khamenei, the founder of the revolution, who died peacefully of natural causes in 1989, and passed power to Khamenei in a managed, orderly transition during peacetime. That transition took careful planning, constitutional amendments, and months of political maneuvering inside a stable government. What Iran faces right now is the complete opposite of that. The supreme leader was not old and dying. He was assassinated. The government is not stable. It is being bombed around the clock, and the body responsible for choosing his replacement just had its buildings destroyed twice in 48 hours. The moment Khamenei's death was confirmed on March 1st, Iran announced the formation of a 3-man interim leadership council. President Masoud Pezeshkian, Judiciary Chief Gholam Hossein Mohseni Ejei, and senior cleric Alireza Arafi were placed in temporary charge. But everyone inside the Islamic Republic understood this was a stopgap, not a solution. Iran's constitution does not give an interim council the authority to command the armed forces, issue religious decrees, or exercise the full powers of the supreme leader. Only the supreme leader can do those things. The pressure to convene the Assembly of Experts and choose a permanent replacement was immediate and intense. Every day without a supreme leader was a day the regime looked like it was collapsing. So the Assembly of Experts began the most urgent and dangerous vote in Iranian history. And the moment they started, a battle broke out within the regime itself about who that new supreme leader should be. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, had one answer, and they were not asking. They were demanding. Their choice was Mojtaba Khamenei, the 56-year-old second son of the assassinated supreme leader. And they were not subtle about the pressure they applied. Iran International, the most reliable Persian-language opposition outlet, reported directly from sources inside the assembly that the IRGC heavily pressured the clerics to select Mojtaba. Not suggested, not recommended. Pressured. The IRGC, the most powerful armed force in Iran, the organization that controls Iran's missile arsenal, its drone fleet, its proxy networks across the Middle East, was telling the 88 clerics how to vote. Who is Mojtaba Khamenei, and why did the IRGC want him so badly? He is 56 years old, a mid-ranking cleric, and for at least the past 2 decades he has effectively been running his father's office, the Beit, the supreme leader's administrative apparatus that is, in practice, the real center of power in Iran. Iran International described the Beit as not just a state within the state, but the core of the state itself. While Iranian presidents come and go, while ministers change and parliaments debate, the Beit has quietly controlled the key security, political, and financial levers of the entire country. Mojtaba ran that operation. He was his father's closest confidant, his gatekeeper, his most trusted operative. He has deep personal relationships across the entire IRGC command structure going back decades. He studied under hardline cleric Ayatollah Taqi Mesbah Yazdi. He served in the armed forces during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s. He is not an outsider. He is the man who has been at the center of Iranian power for 20 years without anyone ever voting for him or publicly acknowledging his role. The IRGC wanted Mojtaba for one very specific reason. Under his father, the IRGC built itself into an empire. Its economic holdings alone are worth hundreds of billions of dollars, spanning oil, telecommunications, construction, and finance. The IRGC does not want a supreme leader who comes from outside its network and starts asking questions about where the money went. They want a supreme leader who is one of them, who will protect the empire they built, and who depends on their military support to stay in power. Mojtaba fits all 3 conditions. He has no independent political base. He has no popular following. He has never held elected office. If he becomes supreme leader, he becomes supreme leader entirely because the IRGC put him there. And that means he will govern at the IRGC's pleasure. The Revolutionary Guards would not just be supporting the supreme leader, they would own him. Other members of the assembly resisted this, loudly. The objection was not purely political, it was theological and historical. The Islamic Republic of Iran was founded in 1979 specifically to overthrow the Pahlavi dynasty, a hereditary monarchy where power passed from father to son. The revolution's entire ideological foundation rests on the argument that clerical leadership is superior to hereditary rule, that religious legitimacy, not bloodline, is what gives a leader the right to govern. Electing Mojtaba Khamenei as supreme leader, the son of the previous supreme leader, would make the Islamic Republic exactly what it always claimed to be the alternative to. It would be the creation of a theocratic monarchy. The clerics who opposed him said this openly. And they were right. The first supreme leader died and was replaced by a qualified cleric through a constitutional process. That was the system working. What is happening now with an unqualified son being installed under military pressure in the middle of a war is the system breaking. But opposition inside a room is meaningless when armed men outside the room are telling you how to vote. And this brings us back to what happened in Qom. Before the assembly could finish its debate, before a final announcement could be made, before the clerics who opposed Mojtaba could mount any organized resistance, Israeli jets found them. The main Tehran headquarters had been destroyed the night before. Now the Qom building was flattened. The council secretary was killed. Multiple officials responsible for counting the votes were killed. The ballot box used for official voting was destroyed. The IDF spokesman Brigadier General F.E. Defrin confirmed the strike on the record. Fox News correspondent Trey Yingst reported live from the region that Israel had struck the exact gathering where Iranians were meeting to choose their new supreme leader. A senior Israeli source confirmed to CNN that the strike was timed intentionally to hit the assembly while the vote was in progress. Iran's own state media tried to deny it at first. The semi-official Tasnim news agency, connected to the IRGC, initially claimed no meeting was taking place in the building when it was struck. Within hours, they reversed course entirely and confirmed the attack had occurred, calling it a criminal act by American Zionist forces. The Mehr news agency tried a different line, claiming the building hit was an old auxiliary structure not in active use. But the footage coming out of Qom made both denials impossible to sustain. The building was flattened. Iranian news agencies themselves used that word. Flattened. Footage showed smoke rising over the ruins of a multi-story structure, walls collapsed inward, debris across a wide area. Witnesses near the site reported additional strikes in the surrounding neighborhood. Israel deployed approximately 100 fighter jets and dropped over 250 bombs on Tehran's central leadership compound in the hours before the Qom strike. This was not a single missile. This was an overwhelming military operation against the political infrastructure of a sovereign country. Trump confirmed a second wave of Iranian leadership killings on the same day as the Qom strike. He told reporters publicly that most of the people they had identified as potential future leaders of Iran were already dead. Not current leaders. Future leaders. People the US and Israel had mapped as the next generation of Iranian governance and had killed them before they could take power. Israel went further and issued a formal warning that whoever was selected as the next supreme leader would be, in their exact words, an unequivocal target for elimination. Think about what that means in practice. Every cleric sitting in that assembly right now knows that Israel bombed 2 of their buildings in 2 consecutive nights. They know the council secretary is dead. They know the vote counters are dead. They know that accepting the title of supreme leader means immediately becoming the highest priority assassination target in the Middle East, with both the United States military and the Israeli Air Force explicitly confirming that person will be hunted. The job opening comes with a guaranteed death sentence attached. Despite all of this, reports emerging on March 5th today indicate that Mojtaba Khamenei was selected as supreme leader under IRGC pressure. The announcement has not been made publicly by Iranian state media. Iran international sources say the decision was finalized but will be formally announced after Ali Khamenei's funeral, which has itself been postponed multiple times because Israeli strikes keep targeting the locations where the funeral was supposed to take place. The regime cannot even bury its dead supreme leader safely because the bombing has not stopped. There is a profound significance to the Mojtaba selection that goes beyond Iranian domestic politics. If confirmed, this will mark the first time in the Islamic Republic's history that power has passed from father to son, the first hereditary succession in a revolutionary state founded on abolishing hereditary rule. A mid-ranking cleric with modest religious credentials and no elected mandate being handed supreme authority over 90 million people because an armed force with guns outside the room told the clerics how to vote. The Council on Foreign Relations described Mojtaba as someone who lacks the senior religious credentials of his father and has never held elected office. Iran International called his selection a departure from traditional qualifications, the same kind of departure that was required when Ali Khamenei himself was elevated in 1989, when the constitution was quietly amended to remove the requirement that the supreme leader must be a grand ayatollah. Now think about what this new supreme leader inherits on day one. Not a peaceful country, a country at war. More than 1,230 Iranians killed since the war began on February 28th. 6 American service members dead, including specialist Declan Cody, killed in an Iranian drone strike on a military port in Kuwait. The Strait of Hormuz closed by Iran, with 150 oil tankers stalled behind it unable to move. An IRGC commander publicly threatening to set fire to any vessel that attempts to pass through. Iran has launched 941 drone attacks against the UAE alone since the war began, plus ballistic missiles and cruise missiles across Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. Iran struck Amazon data centers in Bahrain and the UAE. 2 Amazon facilities remain offline. Iran struck the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh. Iran hit Britain's Akrotiri military base in Cyprus. Iran fired missiles over Turkey, the first time in this conflict that a NATO member's airspace was violated by an Iranian weapon, which NATO intercepted. On the U.S. side, Hegseth stood at the Pentagon podium on March 5th and said America is winning. General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, reported that Iran's missile launch rate had dropped 86% compared to day one of the war. He confirmed that over 20 Iranian ships have been destroyed, including Iran's top submarine. The U.S. Navy submarine that sank the Iranian frigate Iris Dina in the Indian Ocean on March 4th killed 80 Iranian sailors. General Kane said U.S. forces will continue expanding their strikes progressively deeper into Iranian territory. The U.S. Senate voted on March 5th to block a war powers resolution that would have required Trump to seek congressional approval to continue military operations. Senate Republicans killed the measure. The administration has a blank check to keep this war going with no congressional oversight and no defined endpoint. But here is what Hegseth and General Kane are not saying at those Pentagon briefings, and it is the most dangerous part of this entire situation. Destroying the Supreme Leader does not destroy the IRGC. Bombing the election does not stop the missiles. Iran has already demonstrated this. Khamenei was assassinated on day 1. The election building was bombed on day 4. And on day 5 and day 6, Iranian missiles were still hitting U.S. bases. Iranian drones were still flying over Gulf capitals. The Strait of Hormuz was still closed. The reason for this is that the IRGC was specifically designed to operate without political supervision from the top. Foreign Minister IRGC confirmed this himself when he stated that regional IRGC commanders have pre-authorized operational authority to continue attacks even if senior leadership is incapacitated. The machine was built to run with the head cut off, and that is exactly what it is doing. Iran expert Afshan Ostavar from the Naval Postgraduate School told NBC News that even if Iran replaces the supreme leader, what is left of the regime is the IRGC, and the IRGC will be the last vestige remaining of the regime until it is either overhauled from within or by external forces. Stanford's Iran Studies director Abbas Milani was even more blunt. He told NBC that the IRGC of today is not ideologically committed to preserving Shia Islam or clerical governance. They are, in his words, a mafia, a rich corporate entity, and they want to keep their turf. A mafia that controls one of the largest military forces in the Middle East, with ballistic missiles capable of reaching every country in the region, a drone arsenal that Iran has been building and deploying for years, and proxy networks in Lebanon through Hezbollah, in Yemen through the Houthis, in Iraq through various militia groups, all of whom are still active and still attacking U.S. and allied targets, regardless of what is happening to Iran's political leadership in Tehran. Al Jazeera's analysis added another dimension that explains why the U.S. strategy of betting on a popular uprising to finish what the bombs started is running into a wall. With Khamenei dead, the regime reframed the war. The surviving Iranian leadership stopped talking about protecting the supreme leader and started talking about defending Iran's territorial integrity. Foreign Minister Araghchi, Larijani, and others began publicly warning that Israel's ultimate goal is the partition of Iran, breaking it into ethnic statelets. By raising that fear, they transformed the war in the eyes of ordinary Iranians from a foreign attack on a hated government into a foreign attack on Iran itself. University of Tehran professor Hassan Ahmadian told Al Jazeera directly, Iran learned from the June 2025 war that restraint is interpreted as weakness. The decision has been made. If attacked, Iran will burn everything. That is not a government in collapse. That is a government that has decided it has nothing left to lose. What does Mojtaba Khamenei do now if he is officially announced as supreme leader? Iran International's analysis laid out the two paths clearly. The first path is a deal. Iran accepts terms from the U.S., gives up key pillars of its regional and military posture, and gets the bombing stopped. Mojtaba is theoretically positioned to sell that, because he can present any compromise as a decision made by the family, not as a humiliation imposed from outside. The second path is escalation. Mojtaba frames himself as the avenger of his father's assassination and uses the emotional power of that position to keep the IRGC unified and the security state functioning under sustained attack. The problem with the first path is that Trump carries not only Qasem Soleimani's blood in the eyes of the Iranian hardliners, but now also Ali Khamenei's blood. Any deal would have to overcome that history. The problem with the second path is that Iran is losing. The 86% drop in missile launch capacity that General Kane cited means Iran's arsenal is being degraded faster than it can be replaced. The Strait of Hormuz will not stay closed forever if the U.S. Navy starts physically escorting tankers, which Trump has already threatened to do. And every day this war continues is a day the Iranian economy, already destroyed by years of sanctions, collapses further. Israel has answered the question of what it intends to do with one word: Target. Any new supreme leader is a target for elimination. That word was not used by mistake. It was a message to every member of the Assembly of Experts, to every IRGC general, and to Mojtaba Khamenei himself that Israel is not finished with this decapitation campaign. The Supreme Leader's compound was the first target. The election building was the second. The man elected in that building will be the third.
In 47 years, the Islamic Republic of Iran has had two supreme leaders. The first died at 86 of natural causes. The second was assassinated at 85 in an airstrike. The election to choose the third was bombed in two cities on two consecutive nights while the votes were still being counted. And the man selected under IRGC military pressure to fill that role was publicly told by Israel before his name was even officially announced that he is already a target. There is no modern historical precedent for what is happening in Iran right now. A nuclear-adjacent country with the most powerful non-state military force in the Middle East still operational and still firing, with no functioning chain of political command, with a new supreme leader being installed under military pressure in a hidden location because every official building has been bombed, with a U.S. president who has given himself unlimited authority to continue a war whose goals change every time he speaks to reporters. The question of how this ends has no answer yet. And the man who just became Iran's most powerful figure may not survive long enough to provide one. If you want daily updates on this war as it develops, subscribe right now because this story is moving fast. And drop a comment below. Do you think Mojtaba Khamenei survives long enough to actually govern Iran? Or does Israel carry out its threat the moment his name is officially announced? Tell me what you think.